So today I will be introducing you about the medically important parasites. Right? I hope all of you have joined the lecture. Okay. So the learning object. Are you all able to see the PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So the learning objective of today's class is I will be telling you about the type of parasites, then mode of transmission, then what are the infections which are caused by these parasites, then how our body responds to these parasites, that is, what is the immunity level in the body and what kind of immunity response is there. Then I will be talking about the lab diagnosis, how do we diagnose these parasitic infections, and little bit about what should be the treatment of various parasites. So, as you can see in this slide that, and most of you must be knowing also, that parasites have two names. One is the genus and then the species. Right? So these genus and species names they are given on the basis of where they have been found, from which geographical areas. Sometimes they are given the name on the basis of their geographical location. Sometimes on the basis of the habitat of the parasite, in which part of the body. Then on the name of the host or the parasite size and shape. So the parasites are named on the geographical area, size or shape. Then these parasites are classified under following taxonomic units: kingdom, subkingdom, phylum, subphylum, superclass, class, subclass, order, suborder, superfamily, uh, family, genus, and species. So, parasite. What are these parasites? Parasites are basically living organisms which lives in or upon another organism and derives nutrients directly from it without giving any benefit to the host. So parasites nutrient from the host and it causes damage to the host. Right? For example, protozoa and helminths, these are parasites. So if I talk about parasite classification, then parasites can be broadly classified into, you can see in this flow diagram, parasites are broadly classified as protozoans and metazoans or helminths. Among the protozoans, there are different phylums: Sarcodina, Sporozoa, Mastigophora, Ciliata. Among these protozoans, Sarcodina contains amoeba, Sporozoans contains Plasmodium, Mastigophora contains flagellates like Giardia, like Trichomonas, Ciliates contain Ciliata like Balantidium coli, parasites, facultative parasites, accidental parasites, then aberrant parasite or wandering parasite. Obligate parasites are basically parasites which cannot exist without parasitic life in the host. इसका मतलब क्या होता है कि मतलब अगर parasitic life in the host यानी कि अगर host नहीं है then it cannot exist. Like if the man is not there or if the mosquito is not there then it cannot survive. So these are obligate parasites. Then facultative parasites. These are the parasites which can live a parasitic life or free living life without when the opportunity arises, it causes infection. Just like Acanthamoeba and Naegleria. Acanthamoeba and Naegleria, these are found in basically soil and water, and they freely live in soil and water. They do not need any host to survive. They do not need definitive host. They do not need intermediate host, and they live in the water freely in the soil. When
Sir,
the
your voice
opportunity arises, it causes infection. Then there are accidental parasites. Accidental parasites are those parasites which infect an unusual host like Echinococcus granulosus. it infects human being accidentally. Basically, Echinococcus granulosus.
सर स्लाइड शो नहीं हो रही।
हम्म, क्या नहीं हो रहा है?
स्लाइड शो नहीं हो रही सर।
स्लाइड्स नहीं हो रही।
तो सर पिन कर लीजिए।
सर सो हो रहा है, स्लाइड शो हो रहा है सर।
Parasites. So as I told you, accidental parasites are basically parasites of some other animal and they infect human beings accidentally. Then there are aberrant parasites or wandering parasites. Now, these parasites infect a host where it cannot live or develop further, like Toxocara canis, Toxocara catus in the human beings. So these are basically pathogens of animals, but in the human beings they cannot develop. So these are aberrant parasites or wandering parasites. Then what is the host? So host is defined as organism which harbors and shelter to the parasite. So host is active host and the second is intermediate host. Active hosts are those hosts in which the sexual cycle of the parasite takes place. And intermediate hosts are those hosts in which asexual cycle takes place. Like for Plasmodium, the definitive host is Anopheles mosquito. And for intermediate host is man. For Plasmodium, intermediate host is man. Similarly, for Echinococcus, definitive host is whatever problem you are having, you can write on the
सर इसमें
chat
कोई
box.
अपना प्रेजेंटेशन सर इसमें कोई अपना प्रेजेंटेशन पे क्लिक ना करे, स्टूडेंट से कहिए कि प्रेजेंटेशन पे क्लिक ना करें।
प्रेजेंटेशन पे आप क्लिक मत करिए सभी लोग।
स्टूडेंट वो कर देता तो आपकी स्लाइड सर रुक जाती है।
अच्छा अच्छा अच्छा,
यस
तो फिर से रिज्यूम करें, क्या करें?
यस सर फिर से सर एक यस सर
Not develop further and is not essential for its life cycle. For example, freshwater prawn and crabs are paratenic hosts for Angiostrongylis cantonensis, and bigger fishes are hosts for Diphyllobothrium latum, and freshwater fishes are hosts for Gnathostoma spinigerum. Then there are amplifier hosts in which the parasite lives and multiplies exponentially. So these are some kinds of hosts. Then there is host-parasite relationship. Now these terminologies you must have already heard of: symbiosis, commensalism, and parasitism. Now what is symbiosis? Symbiosis is a close association between host and the parasite. Both are interdependent upon each other and they cannot live without the help of the other. And none of them suffer and harm each other. So they live in a symbiotic relationship. That is, they both of them help each other and both of them Uh, Animals are the source of infection for various diseases. For example, echinococcus from dogs, toxoplasmosis from cats. Then there are various vectors like which can transmit parasites, like Anopheles for Plasmodium, Culex for filarial worms, sandfly for Kala Azar, Redovid bugs for Chagas disease, CC fly for sleeping sickness. Then some of the parasites can also be acquired from soil, contaminated soil and water, like from soil it is hookworm, Ascaris, trichuris. From contaminated water, water can get contaminated with human excreta containing cyst of Entaima histolytica or Giardia lamblia. Then people can also get infected by eating raw or undercooked infected meat, like beef containing larva of tapeworm, like larva of Tinea saginata, that is Cysticercus bovis. So beef containing Cysticercus bovis and pork containing Cysticercus cellulosae, if eaten raw or undercooked, then people get infection. Now, what are the modes of transmission? How these parasites are transmitted? So one of the commonest mode is oral or fecal-oral route. So by this route, cyst of Entaima histolytica and ova of Ascaris, Enterobius and Trichuris can be transmitted. Then penetration of skin and mucous membrane. So skin and mucous membrane can be penetrated by Strongyloides stercoralis, hookworm, Schistosoma. And then some of the parasites can also be transmitted sexually, like Trichomonas vaginalis can be transmitted by sexual contact. Then through bite by mosquitoes, which can spread malaria and filaria. Then there can also be vertical transmission from mother to child, like toxoplasma can be transmitted from mother to child. Then some of the infections can also be transmitted by blood, infected blood, like Plasmodium, Babesia, Toxoplasma, Leishmania, and Trypanosoma. These all can be transmitted by blood transfusion. Then there is another mode of infection which is known as autoinfection. Autoinfection means you are having infection with some parasite and then you infect yourself from the same parasite, from the ovas or eggs of the same parasite which you are carrying. So that is autoinfection. So autoinfection uh, can happen by external method or by internally by reverse peristalsis. So if your hands are contaminated with the feces which contains ova, with your own feces which contains ova or cyst, then you can get external autoinfection. So external autoinfection can happen in the case of Cryptosporidium hymenolipsis, Nana, Enterobius vermicularis, Strongyloides stercoralis. Then sometimes you can have internal autoinfection by reverse peristalsis of intestine. तो आपकी अपनी intestine में reverse peristalsis हो जाती है और जो adult टीनिया सोलियम के adult के जो segments होते हैं वो वापस आपके stomach में चले जाते हैं. So that is how you get internal autoinfection. Now coming to life cycle of the parasites. So parasites can have two types of life cycle. One is direct or simple life cycle and the second one is indirect or complex life cycle. Simple life cycle is when the parasite requires only one host to complete. Like for example, Ascaris, life cycle of Ascaris. Ascaris infects only human beings. So and its life cycle keep on occurring in human beings. So that's a direct and simple life cycle. Then for indirect life cycle, the parasite requires two hosts, one definitive or and another intermediate host, or maybe three hosts, one definitive and two intermediate hosts. I will be giving examples. Like for direct simple life cycle, as I told you, these nematodes like hookworm, Ascaris, Enterobius, Trichuris, Strongyloides, they have a simple life cycle. Then these protozoans, they have a simple life cycle. Entaima, Giardia, Trichomonas, Cryptosporidium, Cyclospora, Isospora, Microsporidia. Then these parasites like Leishmania, they need two hosts, one definitive host and intermediate host. Definitive host is man, intermediate host is sandfly. Similarly, Trypanosoma has an intermediate host of Ridovit bug. Brucei, Trypanosoma brucei, CC fly. Taenia solium, pigs are intermediate host. Man is the definitive host. Saginata, man and cattle. Hymenolapsus, man and reptile. Schistosoma, man and snail. Trichinella, man and pig. Phalaenopsis, man and mosquito. Dracunculus medinensis, man and cyclops. And then man acts as an intermediate host. Now, this is a very important question, and you can be frequently asked in your exams in the form of MCQs. That man in most of the time is a definitive host, but in very few infections, man is a intermediate host. Like for Plasmodium, man is an intermediate host. For Babesia infection, man is an intermediate host. For Toxoplasma gondii, man is the intermediate host. For Echinococcus granulosus, man is the intermediate host. For Taenia solium, man is the intermediate host. So these are the few examples in which man is the intermediate host. Then there are some parasites which require a second intermediate host, like Diphyllobothrium, Fasciola hepatica, Fasciola busci, Paragonimus, Clonorchis, Opisthochus, Gnatostoma. In these, man require a second intermediate host. Now coming to pathogenesis of parasitic disease, how these parasites they cause pathogenesis, that is how these parasites cause infection. Now some of the parasites cause mechanical trauma by the eggs, by the larva, by the adult forms. Like trematodes, eggs are large in size and they get deposited in the intestinal mucosa. Like Schistosoma mansoni can get deposited in the intestinal mucosa and cause lesions in the intestine. Similarly, Schistosoma hematobium can deposit in the mucosa of bladder, causing lesions in the bladder and chronic inflammation in the urinary bladder. Then in the lungs, Paragonimus can remain in the lungs, causing various clinical features of pulmonary infections. Then Fasciola hepatica. This remains in the liver and can cause bile duct obstruction or hepatitis or maybe hepatocellular carcinoma. Then various larvae, they can migrate to different places in the body and can cause pathogenesis there, like hookworms, Strongyloides ascaris, they can migrate to lung and can cause pulmonary infections. The adult worms, hookworms, Strongyloides ascaris, Taenia, these adult worms of these parasites, they adhere to the intestinal wall and cause mechanical trauma. Mechanical trauma or sometimes even intestinal obstruction. Then some parasites, they can cause space occupying lesions, that is they can infect and produce lesions in various organs in the body like hydatid cyst and neurocystic sarcosis. They can form space occupying lesions in the brain. Then Buchereria bankrupt-type trematode acts, they can be found in the tissues also. In the tissues they can produce granuloma. Similarly, some of the parasites can produce some enzymes or lytic necrosis. Then some of the parasites can have production of toxins, although they have very minor role in pathogenesis. Then some parasites, they produce allergic manifestations like cystosomes. They cause cercarial dermatitis and rupture of hydatid cyst can cause anaphylactic reaction in the patients. Then filariasis can also present in the form of tropical pulmonary eosinophilia, which is known as occult filariasis. And you can see some of the parasites, they can cause cancer also, carcinoma, like Schistosoma hematobium can cause bladder carcinoma. Clonorchis sinensis or Opisthochus can cause cholangiocarcinoma, bile duct cancer. Then they can also cause secondary bacterial infection, that is, they can take up the bacteria from the intestine and they can migrate anywhere in the body, and thus they carry the bacteria from the intestine to other parts of the body, causing infection there, like cystosomes. strongyloides. It can cause secondary bacterial infection. Now, coming to the immunology of parasitic infection, how is the host immune response? Like if you have a parasitic infection, then how your body is going to respond. So the immune response against the parasitic infection, they all depend on two factors. One is the host factor, and then the second one is the parasitic factor. So what are the host factors? Host factors are immune status of the body, age of the person, any underlying disease may affect the immune response. Then nutritional status of the person, genetic constitution of the person, and various other defense mechanisms of the host, they all can affect the immune response against the parasite. Then parasitic size also matters. The size is too large, the immune response will be low. Then route of entry, the amount of entry of the parasites, then parasitic frequency of infection, how frequently the person is getting infection, and how the parasite is evading the immune response. So all these factors are responsible for immune response in the body. So broadly, the immune response against the parasitic disease are of two types. One is the protective immune response and the unwanted or harmful immune response. So for protective immune response, we have innate immunity, that is whatever the inherent immunity which we have. Then there is acquired immunity. First time when the parasite infects, whatever immunity you develop against the parasite is the acquired or adaptive immunity. Then some of the parasitic infections can be eliminated completely by the host immune response, which is complete immunity. But some of the infections cannot be eliminated completely. So the second term is premunation. What is the premunation? In some infections, the immune defense of the host is sufficient to resist the infection, but is insufficient to destroy the parasite. यानी पैरासाइट आपका completely destroy नहीं होता है. Immune system activate होता है, लेकिन आपका पैरासाइट destroy नहीं होता. Immunity तब तक रहती है जब तक कि पैरासाइट रहता है. जब तक पैरासाइट एक्टिव रहता है तब तक इम्यूनिटी रहती है, और उसके बाद इम्यूनिटी डाउन हो जाती है. So this is known as infection immunity or premunition or concomitant immunity or incomplete immunity. And this kind of immunity is observed in malaria, schistosomiasis, trichinellosis, toxoplasmosis, and Chagas disease. And this kind of immunity also does not last for a long time. हो सकता है कुछ दिन तक ऐसी immunity रहे, incomplete immunity, but it does not last for a long time. So what are the factors which influence innate immune response? Innate means you already have that immunity since birth. So that is innate immunity. So what are the factors which affect innate immunity? One of the factors is age of the host. Like extremes of age are more vulnerable to parasitic infection. Like toxoplasma infection is more common in fetus than in adult or a child. The sexes. So males are more commonly infected with can have amoebiasis. Females, they develop anemia due to hookworm infection. Then nutritional status of a person will also affect the innate immunity. Then genetic constitution of the person. Like if the person is having hemoglobin S or a sickle cell disease or a fetal hemoglobin or a thalassemia hemoglobin, then that person is resistant to Plasmodium falciparum malaria. Or if a person has a Duffy blood group negative RBC, then they are resistant to Vivex, Plasmodium vivex malaria. Now, how do we acquire the immunity? How do we acquire the immunity against these parasites? So, acquired or adaptive immunity is formed by cell-mediated immune response or by humoral immune response. So in some of the parasites, there is cell-mediated immune response or CMI, and cell-mediated immune response is produced by Th1 cells which secrete IL-2 and interferon gamma, and they in turn stimulate cytotoxic T cells, or it can be antibody-dependent cell-mediated cytotoxicity, which is ADCC, which is important for killing of helminths. So you can see helminths can be killed by antibody dependent cell mediated cytotoxicity, ADCC. Then there is humoral immune response. In humoral immune response, there is production of antibodies, and antibodies are produced by activation of B cells. So Th2 response is there in humoral immune response. This Th2 activates B cell, and B cells starts forming, activates plasma cells, and then plasma cells start forming antibodies. So this humoral immune response is uh, required for neutralization of parasitic toxins. They prevent attachment of parasite to the gastrointestinal mucosa by secreting IgA antibody locally. Then they can agglutinate parasitic antigens and thus prevent invasion by IgM antibodies. Then complement system can get activated by IgM and IgG antibody. Then even mast cell degranulation can cause the damage to the parasites. Now, what are the components of innate immunity? This you already know that innate immune response means anatomic barrier by skin or mucosa. So, if the skin by skin schistosomes can enter, hookworms and strongyloides can enter. So, the anatomic barrier. So, anatomic barrier is innate immunity, part of innate immunity. Then physiological barriers, like if you have a gastric acidity, then this giardia will be killed in the acid and it cannot form a life cycle in a body. Similarly, dracunculus and complements are also part of innate immunity. Natural killer cells are part of innate immunity. Then some parasites, they cause hypersensitivity reactions. Now, what are these parasites? As you all know that hypersensitivity reactions are of four types: type 1, type 2, type 3 and type 4. Type 1 is IgE mediated. Type 2 is antigen antibody mediated. They activate the complement. These antigen antibodies activate the complement and activate the natural killer cells, and thus causes antibody dependent cell cytotoxicity. Then there is type 3 hypersensitivity, in which immune complexes are formed against uh, the parasites. The immune complexes are basically antigen antibody complexes. And then type 4 hypersensitivity reaction is a T cell mediated delayed hypersensitivity reaction. So you can see type 1 hypersensitivity reaction. This occurs in uh, schistosomiasis, ascariasis, hookworm infection, echinococcus granulosus infection, hydrated disease, tropical pulmonary eosinophilia. Type 2 occurs in anemia in malaria, black water fever in Plasmodium falciparum malaria, myocarditis in Chagas disease. Then helminths are killed by NK cells, by ADCC dependent cells. Then type 3 hypersensitivity, in which immune complexes are formed and which get deposited in various tissues in the body, like the antigen antibody complex of Plasmodium malariae can get deposited in the kidney, thereby causing nephrotic syndrome. Then schistosomiasis can cause Katayama fever. Katayama fever is a type 3 hypersensitivity reaction. Similarly, elephantiasis, जो हाथी पाव हम लोग बोलते हैं, it's a type 4 hypersensitivity reaction. Leishmaniasis produces type 4 hypersensitivity reaction. Then immune invasion is also there by some parasites. Like कुछ parasites होते हैं, they can invade the cells in the body. Like Plasmodium invades RBCs in the body. Leishmania invades macrophages in the body, lymphocytes in the body. So they can evade the immune response when they get inside some kind of cells in the body. Because body does not recognize its own cell as a foreign cell. Therefore, they evade the immune response when they enter these cells. Then there is these important things and interesting terminologies: antigenic shedding and antigenic mimicry. Like schistosoma, जैसे कोई फॉरेनर आ जाए या जैसे कोई बांग्लादेश से कोई आ जाए and he very much resembles to Indians, और यहाँ आके बांग्लादेशी जैसे कपड़े ना पहने, वो इंडियन जैसे कपड़े पहने, तो क्या करेंगे? इंडियन आर्मी या इंडियन पुलिस उनको क्या समझेगी, इंडियन ही समझेगी और उनको अटैक नहीं करेगी, उनको पकड़ेगी नहीं. सो द सेम थिंग हैपेंस विद शिस्टोसोमा. What schistosoma does, the adult flukes of schistosoma they get coated with the red host cell antigen and histocompatibility antigen. तो host के जो antigens हैं उसी से कोट हो जाती है. ठीक है. Again, are the slides not being shown? Are you able to see the slides? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is antigenic mimicry. Then some of the parasites, what do? They do antigenic shedding or capping. इसमें क्या होता है कि जो पैरासाइट होते हैं ये अपने ऊपर एक लेयर बना लेते हैं और उस लेयर में इन पैरासाइट्स के एंटीजेंस अपने दे देते हैं और जो एंटीबॉडी बॉडी की होती है वो आके उसी लेयर में बाइंड करती है. इट डज नॉट पेनिट्रेट दैट लेयर और कुछ टाइम बाद ये पैरासाइट उस लेयर को छोड़ देते हैं. सो दे बिकम फ्री ऑफ द एंटीबॉडी एंड देयरफॉर दे आर नॉट किल्ड. Like Antennae histolytica, Trypanosoma brucei, and Chylostoma caninum. So I'm not going to details of others because that will become quite boring. Now coming to laboratory diagnosis of parasitic infection. How do we diagnose these parasitic infections? So depending on the site of the parasitic infection, we take the samples. Now if the infection of malaria is there, then what do? We all know that malaria infects RBCs. So what do we take the sample? We take blood sample, EDTA blood sample, and we prepare smears. We prepare smears and then we stain those slides either with Leishman stain or with Giemsa stain and do the microscopy. In the microscopy, we see for the trophozoites or for the schizont stage or for the gametocytes of Plasmodium, and that is how we diagnose. Similarly, the intestinal parasites are diagnosed by taking stool samples. So stool samples are taken on slide, drop of stool samples taken on the slide, and then a normal saline is put on that, and then a cover slip is put on that, and then we see the wet mounds, or we can also put some amount of iodine in the slide because iodine makes stains the nucleus and glycogen matter present in the parasite, and this and then you can clearly see the parasite nucleus and glycogen in the during the microscopy. So for intestinal parasite, we do wet mount and we do iodine mount and we do microscopy. Then how do we examine macroscopy? How do we examine macroscopically? Some of the parasites like flukes, like tapeworm, they are large in size. Like flukes are around the size of a small leaf, and tapeworms they produce proglottids. They are also size of around a small sellotape, and you can actually see them moving in the stool. So you have to examine the stool macroscopically with the naked eye, or these kinds of leaf-like structure or fleshy structures like fleshy proglottids, which you can see moving in the stools. And sometimes you can see the larva or the adult forms of the parasite in the stool, like Ascaris you can see in the stool. So macroscopic examination and microscopic examination are both important. Now, culture method, if I talk about, culture methods are not much of importance in case of parasites because parasites are not easy to culture. However, some of the parasites can be cultured, but again, the culture methods take very long incubation period for those parasites to grow. Therefore, culture methods are not routinely practiced in laboratories. What is routinely practiced in laboratories is immunodiagnostic test, that is antigen and antibody detection test. So, for some of the organisms you can do ELISA, for some of the organisms you can do rapid immunochromatographic tests, like for malaria you can do rapid tests. Then there are intradermal skin tests. These are also not very helpful and nowadays not done. But the newer methods, what there to diagnose these parasitic infections are molecular methods like PCR, real-time PCR, which is done to diagnose these parasitic infections. Then xenodiagnostic techniques are those techniques in which the parasite is injected in a person's arm, and then after some time, it is seen whether it is causing some kind of reaction in the arm or not. Then smears are prepared from that person blood, and it is seen whether the parasitic life is there in the blood or not. So that is xenodiagnostic technique. Then animal inoculation was being used in the past, and animals were inoculated either intraperitoneally or intravenously, or in the brain intracerebrally. They inoculated with the samples, and then there's with the CSF sample or with the blood sample of an infected patient, and then the samples from the animals were taken to see whether these parasites have grown in their samples or not. Then imaging techniques are also important, like people who have hydrated cysts in the liver, they can undergo ultrasound, and ultrasonography can help in diagnosis of those kinds of infection. The CT and MRI are also important, and they can help in diagnosis of neurocystic sarcosis, like toxoplasmosis, like these infections. Then coming to treatment, for treatment, there are various anti-parasitic drugs which are used for different kinds of parasite, different kinds of parasitic drugs are used. Then sometimes surgical management is also required, like in the case of hydatid disease when they form large uh, abscess or a large lesion in the liver or in the lung, then surgery may be required. A neurosarcosis, if it produces a large space occupying lesion in the brain, then the surgery may be required. So as you can see in these pictures, I am not going to details of all these. These are the drugs which are available for amoebiasis: metronidazole, tinidazole, onidazole, and for Naegleria fowleri, amphotericin B is the drug of choice. Then for intestinal flagellates, for giardiasis, drug of choice is metronidazole, and for trichomoniasis, drug of the choice is metronidazole. For Chagas disease is not found in India, therefore I am not talking about. Sleeping sickness is also not found in India, but leishmaniasis is found in India, especially in the uh, Bihar or in the adjoining states of Bihar, in UP also. Leishmaniasis is there. Leishmaniasis को हम लोग काला आजार भी बोलते हैं. So for Kala Azar, this is the treatment: sodium stibogluconate, amphotericin B, carbamazepine, miltefosine. Now for malaria, you already know many of the drugs you might be knowing, like chloroquine, artemisinin, quinine, primaquine, sulfadoxine, pyrimethamine. Then for babesiosis, clindamycin, atovaquone, azithromycin. For toxoplasmosis, quatrimoxazole is the drug of choice. Sparamycin is drug of choice for toxoplasmosis in pregnancy. For cryptosporidium causes intestinal diarrhea, especially in HIV patients, immunocompromised patients. It's a protozoan. So the drug of choice for cryptosporidium is nitazoxanide. Then for isospora is also a coccidian parasite like cryptosporidium, and cyclospora is also a coccidium parasite like cryptosporidium. They also cause diarrhea in immunocompromised patients like HIV patients, or patients on long-term steroids, or cancer patients. And the drug of choice for isospora and cyclospora is cotrimoxazole or trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole. Then for cystodes, what are the cystodes? Cystodes are basically tapeworms. For tapeworms, the drug of choice is praziquantel. Tapeworms are Taenia saginata, Taenia solium. And for trematodes like flukes, Fasciola hepatica, gigantica, drug of choice triclabendazole. For other trematodes, drug of choice is praziquantel. Then for intestinal nematodes like Ascaris, and for Ascaris, for hookworm, the drug of choice is albendazole, mebendazole, right? and for strongyloides, drug of choice is ivermectin. Then there are filarial nematodes which cause filariasis, lymphatic filariasis. So for that, drug of choice is DEC, diethylcarbamazine, or ivermectin also. Nowadays, ivermectin with DEC is being given by Government of India in the villages or in the population where filariasis is quite common. So this is now in the national program, ivermectin with DEC. So that was all for today's introductory class to parasitology. If you have any queries, you can ask me.